Ready to go.
You girls want to come in and grab a seat?
Y'all want to come in and introduce yourselves?
Yeah.
Say
Introduce Alamo Title. Give the floor to Alamo Title and their fabulous
Callie, I'll let you
sponsorship.
take over and introduce your girls.
Okay, Callie with Alamo Title. Y'all can grab some goodies that I brought over here. This is Erin and Shayna at our Alito office. So we're super excited to be able to sponsor the Mimosas for Y'all's class today, and we love the opportunity to earn your business. And I was like, oh, she's talking to me. But yes, so do y'all want to say a little something about y'all's office? And it's only like 5 minutes down the road.
Yes, and we're right across from Railhead, which I feel is like the landmark of East Bergen County. We're just right across from there. We are not allowed to tell the location yet, but we're going to be having a new office in Rutherford, hopefully by the end of the year, beginning of. So we're very excited about that as well. So we'll have both offices. But it's Shayna and I'm the office manager there and escrow officer at our leader office, and Shayna is an escrow officer. So there's 4 of us there. I've been January will be 12 years that I've been doing title. So I really enjoy it, obviously.
I'm Shani Yancey, and I have been in the real estate industry for January will be 6 years. And so a little about me, like I started out in title, and then I thought it would be really fun to be a realtor, and it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, but then she conned me back into the dark side. So I've been back at Alamo, and I enjoy it. I live here locally in Bergen County and so Barron, and yeah, so if y'all ever have any questions or anything, like I said, we're right on Ranch House Road.
And I left her cards and stuff over here too. So
And then, Kevin, do you want to say?
Yes, so I'm Kevin Keeler with the Mortgage Capital. So I'm sponsoring lunch today. So basically I brought some flyers. I'll pass that afterwards. Just kind of describe some of the programs. The farm ranch sector, I guess. So
And he's a broker, and you go through how many?
70 different lenders that we have, so it's not just farm and ranch, but that's the particular reason I'm here today.
Yeah, so you can have the mobile homes and other things that we can deal with out here in this side of town.
Right, USDA or some of the jumbo products that make it farm, but no more big farms, more like a hobby farm. Products.
Cool.
Thank you, Alamo Title.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah, do you guys want to grab a seat so you're not standing? Yeah.
And just a reminder to the panel, your mic is here, so you want to speak up, so we'll get you.
Cool. Okay, so welcome everybody. We are on a roll with our panels. I'm loving the topics we've been doing lately. We thought this one was timely since we just have been having a ton of questions lately about the difference in farm and ranch versus traditional real estate. We chose 3 people that have different specialties, but they all live in the area of farm and ranch for their real estate business. So I'm honored to have you guys here. I know you guys live spread out across the Metroplex. So if we could, and it doesn't matter what order you go in, let's just start by introduction. If you could let us know your name, what office you're with, and maybe how long you've been in the business.
Hey, I'm Mechelle Tyler. I've been selling real estate for just 2 years. And
Office.
oh, an office here in Weatherford. So, and very happy to be here.
Yes. I'm Ayla Reed. I first got licensed in 2015 in Colorado, and I moved my horses down here in 2019, and I've been doing real estate farm and ranch out of the Highland Village office for RE/MAX. So.
I'm Steve Cook. I'm from Granbury in that area, and have been with a different company until recently. I just joined y'all, so I'll be out of this office now. I acquired my salesman's license in 1977, and broker's license in 79, and been full-time agent broker since 1979.
I love that. So you guys actually live spread out from each other as well. Where is your market located? Do you work the whole state? Do you work near where you live? Anybody?
My farm and ranch stuff that I've done has been in the area that I live in, from Carlton, a little small town that's, I think, just this ranch, and then some other ranches right there close by. Yeah.
What about you guys?
For me, I live in the Pilot Point area, so I specialize, and I'd say most of my clients and sellers and buyers are located within that greater Denton, Grayson, Cook County area. But I do have some clients that are looking in the Weatherford area too. So.
And you do come up here, I know you said, because you have birth to mayor up here.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, yeah. And Steve, what about you?
I live south of Granbury, kind of southwest between Granbury and Toller, kind of back in that area. So
Okay.
primarily I work Hood, Somerville, Erath, Hamilton. I travel a little bit, and more so in the last 5 or 10 years, because Hood County, you're kind of running out of ranch land, to be honest with you. So
Isn't it crazy?
I've been in Cross Plains.
You sold all of it.
I mean,
You sold all of it.
I try.
At least most of
I've
it.
been around long enough, and one
Yeah.
time I might.
So do you guys live on farms or ranches? How do you have the history that you have to put yourself into this business? Tell us a little bit about that. You can go in any order, and this is casual conversation, so just let me know what you guys think.
I do live, I guess you would say a ranch. We have 53 acres. My husband rodeos. I rodeo till recently, and then real estate has taken over my life, and I love that.
Which is its own form of rodeo.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's
Get
a
on that
circus.
transaction and it's
No,
like-
this is also a circus. It's not just rodeo, it's a circus. Yeah, and it's on with monkeys. I grew up out in the country where I come from in Andrews. We didn't really have a ranch. We had 5 acres. Once again, I rodeoed there. I've become more into the ranching, and back into a little bit of a previous history when I thought it was cool to get married at 19. My husband then farmed, and so the farming part of it was all cotton east of Lubbock.
Okay.
And so I have, obviously wasn't selling real estate then, but the farming portion of that was all cotton and maize back then.
So you've got some agriculture with the horsing and also the farming side.
And we have our own coastal too. So we bail our own coastal that we have on our place as well.
And I just want to put this out there in advance. You guys can treat me like an elementary school student, because if I say weird words, it's because I don't know. I'm just as interested in everybody hearing this specialty. What about you two? Do you live on a farm ranch situation? Are you immersed in that regularly?
Yeah, so I am. I don't have a lot of property right now, but I do have all my mares and my babies at my house. So all my own horses are at home, and my show horses are with trainers. But yeah, I grew up in the horse world. I've been a competitor my whole life, and last several years, I'm a breeder of Western Performance horses. So I specialize in the reiners, the rein cow horses, the cutters. Those are the lines that I normally deal with. And that translates really beautifully into the real estate business as well, and the type of clients that I work with. But yeah, huge background in the horse world.
I love that. That is so neat. And then you do a little bit of the show and a little bit of the just breeding side of it. So that's two sides of that coin too.
Yes.
What about you, Steve?
I live just south of Granbury, and really don't live on a very large place, but I've got several other places that I operate and own and operate. About 300 acres, something like that. So,
Not too big, 300 acres.
Well,
It's not.
Not
the King Ranch, just.
no.
I live in a subdivision on a 0.3, so.
Well,
Yeah, I love this, dude.
I did have about 75 cows, this drought.
Oh,
I'm down now, 50 something now, but it's been a little rough this year for everybody. Never bought a bale of hay in my life until this year.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. See, okay, but so already what we're seeing is expertise here. And we hear Tracy regularly talk about staying in your competency and making sure you're working in your field of expertise. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to highlight these 3 individuals who live in different areas of the Metroplex, but also have the different skill sets, because if you are an agent who has a transaction of that nature, you're going to want to refer unless you know a little bit about farm and ranch. And these are 3 excellent agents to do so. So you guys are growing up and living in the world of farm and ranch. At what point and how did you decide, let's merge this with real estate? What made you think that? Steve, you want to start?
I was born into it.
Okay,
My mother
into real
became
estate.
My mother became a broker in 1969.
Yes.
So, and I joined my parents, both my parents were in it, and I joined them full-time in 79.
So, but if I was your client, I would fully have trust in that. I mean, look at the background, the history there, the immersion within the community. What about you?
Yeah, I also grew up in a real estate household. So my mom is a residential realtor in Colorado. And so growing up, I was very exposed to the business. First got my license there. So was able to have her mentorship through that, which was great. And then it just really fell seamlessly into my business to make it farm and ranch. Those are all my contacts, all my people, you know, I show all the time. So it just worked very, very well to kind of blend the two worlds together. So.
Well, and then back to the trust, you have that, not only do you have the experience from your history, but you've also got the relocation to the area
Right.
going for you, that you can talk to people who are coming in and out of Texas, which I am quite sure our farms and ranches are likely different than Colorado, but they still need your perspective to be able to communicate that.
Sure.
What about you?
I did not grow up in or with any real estate in my past. I was a teacher. And when we left from Andrews, I didn't want a real job because teaching, you know, you're off in the summers, you're off, you know, you have all those that downtime. So I didn't want a real job. So I decided to be a realtor. And I believe I do work harder now than I ever have in my life. 7 days a week. And I love it though. I'll tell you,
It's not a real job.
It's not a real job. Not like teaching where you're off at 3 and you have your summers off, but it is very flexible and I do love my job. So no, I did not grow up that way, but I feel comfortable with farm and ranch because I do have the history of rodeo and what it takes, you know, I guess, what is out there when you do look at farm and ranch property.
Well, and your story is a little bit different because you originally intended to go residential and farm and ranch found you.
Exactly. And they were people that I knew.
Yes, similar to her, where they wanted your expertise in that area to marry that transaction with their farm and ranch life. Okay, so all of you do residential real estate as well, yes? Does anybody do any commercial? Do we stay in residential real estate and farm and ranch area?
Very little commercial.
Okay.
I have some clients that sometimes will have some interest in that, and normally it's seemingly horse related.
Yeah,
Whether
that's
it's
what I was wondering.
yeah, whether it's like they are interested in leasing a space for a clinic or something, you know, along those lines. But limited on the commercials, so definitely mostly farm and ranch, and then a little on the luxury residential. too.
But like Mechelle, when it is commercial, it finds you because of your specialty.
Yes, very much so.
And you guys have all created word of mouth followings within your communities that help bring additional referrals. So for those like me who do not have any farm and ranch, somebody tell us a few of the differences between residential real estate and farm and ranch. What do we need to know that's a little bit enough that we don't want to be dangerous? We want to still refer to people who specialize in farm and ranch, but tell us why. Why is it so important that it's somebody who specializes in that?
In my opinion, farm and ranch is just for those that don't know anything about farm and ranch. I think it's just, yeah, but you do, you just don't realize you do, because it's the same transactions. It's just more land. You know, in my opinion, it's just more land. There are a few other things, you know, checklists that you need to go by as far as, you know, someone with farm and ranch and even with residential that's in the country that don't have much land. They want well reports. Those are easy to get, you know, how much their well's pumping. But as far as, to me, I don't think it's any harder than some of the residential stuff, in my opinion. You're just dealing with a little bit more land and a few more little things as far as tractors, does that, you know, convey with the property, well reports, at, you know, your ag exemptions.
Non-realty. I didn't even think about non-realty.
And so I think it's just kind of a mind game when someone calls you and they say, okay, I have 10 acres and a house and we do have some cattle and it's cross fenced and all that stuff. I think it just blows some of them's mind thinking that it's something that you can handle, and you can.
What do you guys think?
To your point, I agree. I think there are, to me, I think if you're an agent who specializes in residential and you're interested in kind of bridging the gap or starting to do some farm and ranch, I definitely think anybody can, but I think you don't know what you don't know. And that's where it gets scary. So for me, And for my clients, there is a very specific set of lingo and terminology and things that you need to know and that you're going to look for a particular client. And the bigger the property, the more involved it gets. So we're talking about, oil and gas. We're talking about easements. We're talking about, the utility companies that are going through property. Are you in multiple counties? What kind of infrastructure on the equine side? When I call an agent and I'm on the buyer side, these are the questions my buyers want to know. How big are the stalls? What's the footing? There's a specific line of questions that if you don't have the background for that particular buyer, whether it's farming in an ag side or it's on the side of horse ownership and anything from a small facility to a commercial facility, there's just a lot of items that you need to know, and well reports, of course, and if it's raw land, then it's soil testing and samples, and there's just a lot of process. But I think if you're committed to learning it, it's certainly not something that I would say, oh no, if you don't have a farm and ranch background, you can't sell farm and ranch real estate. You certainly can. You just have to be dedicated to the knowledge.
I think crickets are good luck. So
I
maybe
think so, I
that's
saw
what
it, yeah. I was wondering which way you're gonna turn.
Where's my ranch people?
here
Get
to
'em.
learn. Right.
He's here to learn.
Somebody wrote
Farming
that
and
thing.
about- He's like, it's a big cricket.
So basically it's its own language, but also it has its own history on the property as well.
Sure. Yeah. I just think if you're interested in selling it, it is a dedication, to have the knowledge base to do it. Much in the same way, like myself, if someone came to me and said, hey, I have a 400 suite medical office building I want to sell. That's not my core competency.
Mhm.
There's no way I'd be able to be the best advocate. Very similar on this side. Could I learn it? Sure. But it would be a dedication to that. And I would need to most likely bring someone else in to really have that ability. So just knowing your limits and knowing that you don't know what you don't know. I
Well,
think is the
you can
biggest thing.
study a book, but you can't.
Right.
You can't make up for the life experience that the
Yes.
three of you have that attracted you in the first place to this specific specialty within the industry. So I do think that you could pull out a book and read that, but I don't think you'd ever know the history that they know unless you kind of had that background.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, isn't it true as well, like if you're doing cattle and farm and ranch, you need certain size tanks to provide for a certain number of heads of cow, like there are things that you actually need from a support perspective that need to be a part of that. And that would be a very difficult thing for someone who doesn't do farm and ranch to be able to help identify, yes, this is a good setup if they want to have 50 or 100 cattle, there needs to be this many tanks on the property, or is that so?
Soil type, there's all kinds of considerations.
Yeah.
Soil type,
Yes.
what do we have here?
Varies a lot.
Okay.
Oh, it's different everywhere.
Yeah, I
Like
can
right, and right there in Erath County, you can go from very nice sandy to rocky
Yeah.
within 20 miles of each other. And maybe even less than that, because Marcia doesn't live very far from me and it's rocky in the area that she's at. So it just,
Similar.
Which certain livestock can't graze on and things like that.
Right,
So-
right.
Carrying capacity.
Yes.
Well, let me bring up another question, if you got people coming from out of state, and they're bringing their animals, are they going to ask, what is the natural fauna there? What do I have to be careful of it, obnoxious weeds, specific animals and so forth, so do you see that a lot?
Yes, yeah, 'cause a lot of people that are, in my experience is, most of the places I'm selling are not truly farm and ranch people. They're coming out of the city and they want to get into this environment. And,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, a lot, I don't know about y'all, but
Well,
I run into that.
some of the city want land and want to hunt.
Yeah.
They want to come out of, the bigger cities and they want a lot of land and hunt.
When I first started selling real estate, it was about production, the postal field or peanut land or something like that. Once you, now that means nothing to most of them. Now, horse people with grass and stuff like that, but most people are coming out. I've walked out, and I guess I shouldn't say this, I've walked out in a field full of brimweed and the client's going, look at all this coastal. I'm not coastal, but anyway, it's just, it's
Well, you
just a
should say
different
that
kind of
because you
vibe.
know that. I would not know
It's a
that. If they
different
said that,
kind of
I'd be like, oh, cool. So
I think that's one I thought.
Yes, it Erika thought ocean, so I feel like it
Yeah.
highlights your expertise knowing that, but it's very interesting what you said, because our Metroplex is so tight and land bound that people who don't necessarily have that experience are desiring that land, not for production capacity or breeding or for income, but just so that they don't have a close neighbor.
We've seen a lot of that since, especially since COVID.
Yeah.
There's a ton of people that have decided to really make a lifestyle change, that want to be on acreage, whether that's they want a 5-acre ranchette, or they think they want, 100 acres and they want to have, a small type farm, whether that's hobby with chickens or cattle or whatever it is. So that's another excellent point. You really become a knowledge-based resource for those people as well, because they don't have the background to say, hey, what is on this property? What do I need to know?
They don't even have the vendors to call. You
Yeah,
have
they
to
have no
provide
idea.
the
Yeah.
resources
That's what I
for
was
them
gonna
to
ask
find
you,
that stuff
Cause I
out.
know there's a lot moving, like a lot of people moving. How do you deal with that? With somebody that's coming here that wants to buy a ranch or wants to buy a farm or even bring their horses here and they have no clue what it is? Do you take them by the hand step by step and let them know everything?
I had a call 2 or 3 days ago on a 21-acre tract I've got west of Toller over there. It's solid rock. I mean, you could not raise a blade of grass on it. Guy had horses. And I told him, I said, I'm sorry, but you're welcome to look at it, but you're not looking at the right tract of land for that. And I into something else. He hasn't bought it yet, but I'm just saying you kind of do.
You take them step by step all the way through and I'm
I
sure
look
you're
at it
still
if
their
it were my
resource
own,
for
what
them.
would I want for my own, like that.
So, and that's brings a question to my mind. Do most people come with their animals, or do they, because the soil and the air and the lifestyle and the grass is so different here, if they do move from somewhere out of state, do they sell their animals up there and rebuy here, or they bring everybody?
No, they'll bring them.
Okay, and they can acclimate?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very, I don't think I've ever had a situation where someone who has, horses, cattle, whatever
Yeah.
it is, says, nope, I'm gonna sell everything and then move. Most of the time, especially in the horse world, they're bringing everything. Everything's coming with them.
Mhm.
Cattle might be a little
Just a
different.
little bit,
Yeah, you
yeah,
got
it-
sales and everything.
yeah.
Well, I think don't horses live a very long time too, so they become part of their family and.
It depends on what they're in business for. If they're a breeder like me, more than likely they will probably raise those horses to a certain point and sell them into the industry, whatever that respective industry is. There are some people that, they have a couple of hobby horses and they are lifers and stay with them forever. So it's a mix for sure, but everybody with the horses, they definitely come with, so.
So is there instances where, because there's obviously, like you said, equipment that's sold with the residential real estate. What else like that happens in the transfer that we may not know about? What type of equipment can we expect to have questions about? And is there cases where people sell fully functioning farms with their animals as a package? How does that work?
Seldom. I haven't sold many
Okay.
places the cattle went with it, to be honest with you. Cattle are very liquid. You load them up in the trailer and they're gone. You cash them in that day, whatever. But I have sold several places with pivot irrigation, tractors involved. It's hard to separate the two sometimes in a financial deal. A lot of lenders don't want to see the tractors involved. Now, the pivot irrigation maybe is a different story, but you try to keep those separate if you can in the transaction.
I was
or do.
wondering about that, because I know lake properties like that, where they'll sell it furnished with some, the lake toys and all that, and the
Right.
appraisers don't want anything to do with that, but the sellers want to include it in part of the value. Is it similar for farm and ranch, where they, like, you walk into a listing presentation and they say, here's my house, but also I've got all of this equipment? Do you guys have to come up with value for that, or do they?
Or is it included in the contract like it is in residential?
Yeah.
Please.
It can be both.
Yeah,
It can be.
It is.
And when I say lenders don't like it, most of the lenders that I work with in the farm and ranch, Lone Star, Farm Capital Credit, stuff like that, they will lend money on those type of stuff. It's different than a residential transaction where you cannot add any kind of refrigerator. They don't like that included on the contract.
Yeah.
I mean, anything. How many times they had to strike that because the lender kicked
Well,
it back.
That's why I was thinking this big equipment probably is an extra step to everything. Again, you have to have the resource.
It certainly is, and to your comment about, pricing, normally if you have a client who's selling, and they're selling equipment, whether that's arena drags or irrigation system, whatever it might be, they'll have a pretty good idea of the value. I don't think I've ever had a seller that's like, I have no idea where to price this tractor at. They have a very good idea. Yeah, they're like, if you tell them a value they're not happy with, they're like, Billy Joe said it was worth this, but I don't see the penny. So, normally that's how it is, but, yeah, it's another step.
And the city
for sure.
person moving onto the land just for space doesn't know either, so they're like, sure, I'll take it. So you mentioned minerals. Talk about that a little with large tracts of land.
That's changing, or it is in my country where I'm operating, 2008, 2009, it was a nightmare. Because
Barnett Shale?
Well, yes, because you go into a listing and nobody's letting go of the minerals. Nobody wants to buy without some control. And back then it was a monetary amount. I've had places down there that they were leasing and we were too, $2,000 an acre, So you got a guy sitting here fixing to lease this place for $2,000 an acre. And back then land might bring $7,000. That's substantial to the people. And now the production has gone down. Well, of course, the price of gas has tripled in the last couple of months. But by the same token, the production in my part of the country where I operate is so low right now. It's really more of a matter of having some kind of control over drilling and keep them off, basically, trying to keep the drilling off the property. Is it the same up there?
Yeah, that's definitely a huge piece of it is when it comes to oil and gas is, if you're buying a large piece of acreage of any type, if it's, something you're gonna have cattle, horses, raise a family on, whatever your business looks like, if you're in ag production or whatever it might be, the last thing in the world you want is to purchase this property, be living your dream, and then find out, oh, well, now we've got, pump jacks everywhere. We've got these issues to deal with. We have this easement that's here, this utility company can come in. So definitely want to make sure that what is conveying fits what that buyer is looking for 100%.
That's before the sale and before the closing through survey, as in traditional real estate, or?
Please answer.
It really needs to be negotiated before the sale.
Your minerals,
There are
dude.
huge misconceptions in the mineral world out there that most people don't realize that if you don't have 100%, which hardly anybody around this country has 100%, there is no guarantee that somebody's not gonna come in there and drill. You
It doesn't,
cannot.
unless it's a permanent structure right there, they will come in and right on your property, it could be right in your backyard and drill whatever they want and put it up.
Well, and
there's
back to the
nothing
fact
you
that
can
we're
do.
expanding so fast, they're eyeballing these large ranches going cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Well, that oil and gas is really big, because even on residential, small, larger tracts of residential, is that without literally hiring an oil and gas attorney, most
Correct.
people think they own it, and they really don't. So you have a seller that's going, okay, as a marketing, hey, I'm conveying all my oil,
Right.
but they don't even own it,
Right.
or they own, like you said, 5%.
Well,
There's so much hidden in there.
And the other thing is too, if the seller is not privy to a lease,
Yes.
then he doesn't, he's not a party to it. So you have a situation then too, where if it was 1927, when that was conveyed, that seller who's selling the property now is not a party to that lease. So they're not gonna know or have to disclose it anyway, because it's not them. So then that becomes something that you're absolutely right. You need to get an attorney involved. You need to really figure out what conveys with that property.
I've gotten to where I'm like the eternal pessimist when it comes to it. I just tell people,
That's right.
nobody can guarantee you they cannot drill.
Expect
And
nothing.
unfortunately, in this industry, there's a lot of real estate salespeople that are not saying that.
True.
And they're saying because they check that box does not convey ingress egress. In other words, that doesn't really mean anything. It's prior reservation.
That's what you hope happens.
Well, that's true, but it's seldom that's true. In your point, that it's the guy with 5% from 1927.
Yep.
The minerals are superior to the surface, and they always will be in state of Texas. That's what people don't understand.
Comment in the chat.
So in chat, Joyce Wallace, who's one of our fellow Weatherford agents, she just wanted to add to the comment that you guys were talking about the different things that might be being drilled for. And she just wanted to throw in that we do primarily in this area have natural gas and not so much oil in this area. So just wanted to throw that out.
again, something I wouldn't have known. So that's, I mean, I've never done any farm and ranch. Anytime I've ever had any farm and ranch, I refer it out just because I know there is so much of a language. So
Can
since,
you restate what you said about
Yeah.
that the minerals are superior? What did you say that?
In the state of Texas, the minerals are superior to the surface. So if you have an ownership in minerals, whoever owns the surface cannot stop you from developing your minerals on there.
I was gonna say, I had before I was a realtor years ago, a piece of property with my family, they went through eminent domain to get on the property anyways. So they didn't even, when they didn't have the rights, they still went on the property, they drilled.
Just because if I sell my farm to you and I relinquish my rights for ingress and egress, that's great. But if there's somebody else with any type of ownership out there, I know it's an extreme situation, but if there's 1% from somebody, technically they can still develop it. So that's, I'm kind of pessimistic, I guess, when it comes to that way about people. I'd rather people know the truth of what, you know, than get that letter and later on.
so let's talk a little bit about the actual sale, since we are in a market that's quickly expanding. How much of your farm and ranch is being approached by developers wanting to break it up? And are we seeing more of that? Is it prominent? Is it minimal?
My farm and ranch that I've had, the guy, I mean, like the one that I had that was a large deal. He strictly, this was a 1031 exchange, came down, brought his cattle, beautiful place, 2 homes. Daughter lives in one because she goes to school at Tarleton. So they strictly, there's no development with that. Now, it did offer more acreage, but it was not as good of an area than what he needed. And that part, the listing agent or the lister or the agent on the other end, he has developed that, and all of that is already sold instantly for 20,000 an acre right there. The other one is strictly same thing, all cattle. They had beautiful coastal bluegrass. It's not going to be broken up into anything.
What about in y'all's area?
For me, yeah, huge amount of investor buyers. So I'm kind of up right on that 377 growth corridor. So everything from Aubrey all the way up Pilot Point, Collinsville, Lake Kiowa, Valley View, and then you get into Gainesville and Whitesboro. Huge amount of investor buyers.
Which is
So-
all becoming one part of the
Correct.
metro. It's so wild when you
Yeah.
drive out there.
It
You guys live
is, it's crazy, and then you also have the tollway that's coming in. Salina obviously is its whole another animal, but great example, I had a farm and ranch property that I closed in July, that was 228 acres. It ended up going to a barrel racer, which was awesome. My sellers were very happy, but my phone blew up for a month with investor buyers.
Wow.
And all they wanted to do was divide it into the smallest possible that they could, sell it, do mixed use, and we're seeing that all along road frontage now too. It's kind of sad in a way, you know, growth and change is part of it.
Yeah.
But it's hard when you see a lot of these family farms that we're starting to see developed and changed for different purpose.
Yep.
But on the upside, people are starting to sell those and then they are reestablishing further north or in different locations. So it's not that it's all going away, it's just a lot of change.
Well, it's sad for non-farm people too. When I pass my big field of longhorns and it's now a gas station, I as well have a little bit of heartbreak. I'm like, oh, I wish I would have stayed a farm. Same for you?
It is, it's
Developing?
geographical. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to worry much in Alexander, or Carlton like that, but in Pilot Point or a lot of the country I'm around right now, people are buying them. I work for several larger ranches that are systematically just selling off 200 or 300 acres a year, like they're just downsizing because of age, whatnot, and they're de-restricting a lot of it. And so we've been selling off about 300 acres a year on one particular ranch, and they've agreed to, that they chose to de-restrict a minimum of 30 acre tracts.
And they
I'm
made
having
that
to beat the
choice.
developers off with a stick because they've stuck to their guns. And I'm proud of that. I mean, that's nothing wrong with development. I've done some of it myself, but I'm just saying that it's nice to see some of those big ranches stay
Keep the
somewhat.
integrity.
Yes,
Well, it's
exactly.
Texas. That's what you think.
That's
You
right.
think you're gonna get here and there's gonna be cows and horses and I know everywhere I go throughout the country, people think that. I mean, they still have the perception that we ride horses to school, so,
When we got asked in Vegas, why don't y'all have an accent?
yeah.
I was like, oh, I don't
Do you
know.
have horses? And-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point about them deed restricting that, because, you know, I get a call and like I say, I'm residential, you know, I know enough to be dangerous from farm and ranch, that's why I don't, you know, I go for help or refer it out. But you get a call from California, you know, all of a sudden, you know, I get it because it's a lead and they want about 300 acres. I'm like, yeah. But if you don't know that they're planning to break it up, they go and buy it and then they get way down in the deed and they say, oh my gosh, I can't do more than 30. Then the lawsuits happen. And so there's so many moving parts that I think, like you were saying, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
There's so much of you don't know what you don't know in this that, you know, yeah, I'd love to go sell me a big old ranch, but I'm not gonna do that.
One very good point too.
Yeah.
That's why Schedule C on that title commitment is so important. It may not be my restrictions or my client's restrictions. It may have been a restriction from 1982. And unless you go through that title commitment, you're not gonna know that if you're representing a buyer especially.
And to have expertise like y'all do, because you live there, you do it every day, and we all I'm still getting expertise in residential, I mean, you know, but we all learn stuff, but not even, so you get a buyer, you don't even know the questions to ask the buyer to make sure you're helping them get the right property, what they want. You don't even know to ask that, so.
So to Mike's point, how often are you dealing with agents who are not skilled in farm and ranch when you're on the other side? Even in terms of condos, you know, when you get into your competency, there's a lot of people that want to dabble or try, and especially with the way that our area is developing. Are you seeing that 50% of the time, 80%? How often is the person on the other end of the deal farm and ranch knowledgeable?
I'm lucky where I'm at in Erath County because the agents that I've dealt with on any of my farm and ranch stuff that I've sold they're the same. They're in the same boat. They're farm and ranch for sure. Yes.
You let out an exhale, so I'm assuming it's a little different.
Way different.
Yeah. Oh man, it is. You know, the tough thing is when you get an agent, especially if I'm repping a buyer and I have an agent on the listing side. And I actually have a good example of that. There was a property in Argyle, it's been over a year, it's since sold, but I had a buyer at the time who was very interested in it. You know, had a very beautiful home, but it was about 60 acres, had about 30 stalls. It was set up, you know, to be a cutting facility. And it was, from what I could tell off the photos, could be a potential work. So I called the other side and it was brutal. I was asking him questions. He's like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. And then he finally told me, he's like, I'm not a horse person and I have no idea. So maybe you should come and see it. And I'm like, okay, like,
But
why
also,
are you
can you
selling
ask
it?
your seller?
Yeah, can
Right.
you please get me the information? So, you know, I think it's just the knowledge-based side always in anything, whether you mentioned condos or whether it's lakefront property or commercial, whatever it is, you need both sides to be knowledgeable because then it goes to all one agent to have to carry the burden of the entire transaction to make sure everything is correct. And then that's usually when, you know, you're opening the can of snakes halfway through the transaction. You find stuff out that you didn't know or that should have been disclosed and wasn't. So it's an adventure where I'm at for sure.
In your area, a lot of people are skilled in farm and ranch, yes?
No. I experienced it. When I worked more at Erath, your Trigg and all those guys, yes, I mean, in Bosque County, I work, I know the same people down there and they're in Somerville mostly, in other words, but we have a lot of people coming in that, especially, and a lot of my larger tracks, require that I'm present to showing.
Yeah.
Number one, most of the agents don't have the tools, either Polaris. I've got a couple Polaris I use for different things, and my son uses one sometimes. But anyway, mapping, MapRight, different mapping systems that, I mean, and truthfully, I've done this all my life, and I grew up on a farm and ranch environment. You get out in the middle of 500 acres, you can't figure out which way's up sometimes. I mean, I've been out on places like that. I had 2,100 acres over in Lipan. And I mean, as long as I've done this, I actually got lost a couple of times driving around out there on the Polaris. And if you've never done that, you can imagine, even on a 50-acre track, if it's got a lot of timber or something like that, you don't know where you're going. It helps to have a little knowledge of that. But also, to a point you brought up a while ago, as far as knowledge, there are certain areas like northwest Hood County, over in the Lipan area, some of that area over there, you can't get water.
Correct.
I mean, there's absolutely no water. You can drill all the wells you want and it just doesn't exist. And let me tell you, you talk about a lawsuit.
That's north of Stephenville, same way. You get a little bit north and there's been some issues with water.
Well, and it's those listings, if you don't know, like, like I said, we've got all these California people calling us and so, yeah, I want 100 acres. Oh, okay, yeah, great. You get excited. And that's why I said, I know enough to be dangerous because I learned the hard way that I need the expertise, right? And so you find out and the listing agent who may not still even know what he's doing. Oh, yeah, there's water, it's great. And I'm like, so I probe a little more, find out they're getting 2 gallons a minute and it's really not water, it's mud.
Yeah.
So there's so much that's hidden like that you don't even know.
Luckily, a lot of the counties are putting in co-op water.
Yes.
We're not in Hood County, but I know parts of Lipan has it. Somerville County is putting in a huge complex of public water for that. So that'll help the situation a lot.
So I'm assuming in addition to hoping that the agent on the other end of the deal is skilled, it's probably also vital for you guys to have a lender that knows what they're doing, a title person that knows what they're doing with land, and potentially an inspector. And talk about that. Is there separate land inspections? I don't even know.
I'm aware of it now, if there's a structure on there, obviously.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, at that point, it wouldn't necessarily, if it was raw land, you wouldn't necessarily have an inspector. It would be more, we kind of discussed it earlier. We have the well report, you're going to, obviously you have your survey, and then for me, soil testing. There are other things, other processes that you would still need to do. You wouldn't necessarily just call the inspector like you do with residential and say, okay, head out there on Tuesday. I mean, it's just a different process. If you do have structures, of course, inspection, but then again, too, you do need someone who has some skill with that, because if you have a large barn or if you have a large arena, if an inspector only ever has done, 2-bedroom, 2-bath residential home, they're gonna get there and be like, I don't know,
Looks great.
the hot water looks fine to me, nobody knows, so.
So I have a question. So like on your barns and your equine centers, are there code items that an inspector would find? Is there, because clearly we have code items that show up on residential. Does that work the same for the electrical, the water, in your barns? Is that the same thing that applies?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it has to be, especially in the electrical, it has to be done to code. The specific code, I couldn't tell you, that's not an expertise for me, but a great example of that, I had a property in Collinsville that I sold, a beautiful facility, and there were some things that came back on the electric side that needed addressed to bring everything to code in the barn and in the arena and a few other items. So I don't know if there's a huge difference between like dwelling versus barn in terms of what's to code for plumbing or electric, but there certainly is a standard that needs to be met and needs to be inspected so that it is proper, especially in a barn. You don't want an electrical fire in your barn. That would be awful.
What constitutes land as farm and ranch? What's the qualifying factors?
It's changed a lot.
It has?
You mean the difference between calling it a ranch or a farm?
Yeah.
When I first started, a ranch was considered anything over 1,000 acres.
Okay.
So let's just say that's changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it now?
I have people every day go out there, 7 acres, if they're from the West Coast, it's a ranch.
It's a ranch.
You don't want it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
That's exactly what I tell people.
Well,
They
they'll
ask
tell me, we want 5 to 7 acres to ride horses. And I'm like, well, you're gonna be turning a lot.
I hope you can turn.
Yeah. But anyway, that's all relative.
Yeah, circle.
I don't know what would you call a minimum ranch nowadays? I mean, I'm a little jaded on that. 'Cause I'm old.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There's certainly, I don't know if there's necessarily a minimum that you would qualify it to. To me, the biggest difference when we talk about what is the difference between farm and ranch, the difference is this: if you have a farm, it is because you are raising some type of agricultural product. If you have a ranch, you are doing something with livestock, whether that's cattle or horses or sheep or whatever the difference might be. I always laugh when people are like, yeah, I grew up on a horse farm. I'm like, really? Did they grow out of the ground? Because that's what you're saying. So that's the big split between the two.
I love that. Okay, so in terms
It's funny
of,
that people don't know the difference
Yeah.
between
Yeah,
farm and ranch.
Well, I
That's
have-
why
I
I never
have-
grew up in it. I really
yes.
don't know, but I have to explain it to people.
See,
and
that's
I'm
a
not even
problem.
from Texas.
I grew up around it. My grandparents cattle farms, they had 600 acres out in Montana, and I thought I was semi-country until I met country, and I was like, oh, I went to Stephenville and over Tarleton, and those people that actually had sheep and stuff that they did themselves, not just fed baby calves. So I'm part of the problem here.
But you admitted it, so.
I
you're
do,
totally-
I will be the first
That's
to
your
say
first step.
I can feed a baby calf, and I've lived to Salt Lake before, but I have a person right now who calls her place a farm because she's got a wash pad and a stall. And it's like 4 acres, so she's.
It's all
So
relative.
to Steve's
Yeah.
point, yeah, it's changing
I
from
call
a
my place
perspective.
a ranch and people ask me how big it is. I said it's 1 acre. I go, it's the biggest ranch Janine will let me buy.
Janine, are you listening, Janine? Okay, so from a contractual standpoint, obviously, there's also differences. Do we have other forms? We're on a different contract. Break it down a little bit for us.
On the farm and ranch contract, you do have, it's different than the residential because it does have a whole list of things that are on there. I mean, it asks from details to water troughs to,
Easements.
yeah, easements, anything like what she had mentioned a while ago. I mean, there's a whole other area there that you would check to see, you know, like I said, like that, your water troughs, your easements, your,
Rollback taxes is a weird.
Surface leases,
Yeah.
different things. that
Yeah.
residential just doesn't exist.
I don't know what rollback taxes have to do with it. What is that?
I would say it's a lot to do with it.
Big deal.
Yeah, what's the deal?
If you buy a place that I own, say I've got 100 acres and you buy it, I've had it in ag for 40 years or whatever. If you buy it and you come in there and subdivide it, the appraisal district's gonna come back in. That law's actually changed. They can roll it back. Is it 3 now?
I think it's 3. It used to
It
be
used to
5.
be
I think.
5.
Yeah.
Right. So it used to be 5 years. They can roll back
On
the
the
taxes.
entire thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
And the difference is whatever the market value at the time was, that prior 5, again, the state legislation just recently changed it to 3. You pay a tax at that point in time. So I mean, these.
Forever he changes the use, so
Yeah.
if he's building hay and I come in and buy it and put custom homes on it.
Yep.
It would come back to me for that change, but you can sometimes negotiate that
That's right.
in your sale prior to closing, as long as you're familiar with it. That is one thing I am familiar with.
Most developers are very savvy to that, and they'll, you know, if an old farmer like me or something like that is saying, okay, I'm gonna sell you my land, but I'm $30,000 an acre on this $100. Obviously, he's not buying it for cattle production. And so they'll try, a savvy developer, and most of them are, will try to negotiate something on that up front.
This ain't their first rodeo
But
either.
again, it's changed to 3 years now, and I think that the interest rate used to be 10%, you pay the penalty, bless you. You pay the penalty on that, I've been to that, I think they lowered it to 7, yeah, I think so.
That's probably because those developers have a lot of money and they've lobbied at the state
Probably so.
to get it changed.
Yeah,
That's right.
guaranteed on that.
That's another, and I don't mean to interrupt, I'm sorry, but the ag value is such a big issue because you can never guarantee a buyer when they buy that place, it's gonna continue to stay in ag. And there is a conception, if it has ag, it's gonna always have ag. Let me tell you, I was on the review board in Hood County for too many years, but anyway, that's not the case. I mean, they're pretty aggressive down there. Now Parker, from what I'd seen in the past, it was actually pretty liberal. And wisely so, because these small horse places, they would allow them to do it. And I think it's wonderful, because then they get to tax the barn and all that. But they were very aggressive in Hood County about denying ag. So if you just sit out there and piddle around with it, they're gonna come.
Well, and it's also important to note as well, what does qualify as an ag exemption besides just obviously there's a size of property that you have to have depending on where you are, but it also breaks down to what qualifies you as ag exempt. And there is a misconception that now if you're in the horse world, you know this, but if you just own horses, that is not a qualifiable ag exemption. You have to be a breeder, or you have to have a purpose with that horse. If that horse is simply on your property, that does not qualify you for ag. So coastal production, that is a qualification. Having cattle, raising cattle, that is a qualification. Breeding horses, qualification. But you need to make sure that if the buyer or your seller didn't know these things, that they're very educated on what would allow those exemptions to continue. Especially, and we talked on this earlier, buyers that are coming in that don't have any farm and ranch background. I moved from the city, they want the acreage and they're like, oh, ag exemption, fantastic. Like I'll save so much money in taxes. And then they figure out when they get that call, like, oh, I actually have to have a purpose with this property. And I've had those
And
calls.
pet
Yeah.
horse doesn't count.
Pet horse does
Yeah.
not count,
Oh, well,
yes,
then.
yes, chuckles in the pasture.
Yeah,
do not
yeah, I
count.
didn't get ag for that.
I've heard income producing.
That-
Yes.
Kind of a
They gotta be
general term.
attempting to.
Yeah.
Right, so
attempting-
if
They
you-
can lose money, but they gotta be.
Right, and we often do in the horse world. But
Same
yes,
business, yeah.
if you're a trainer, same thing. If you have an income producing business or you can prove that in the equine world, then yes, that would be a qualified exemption for sure.
So tell us a hurdle or a challenge or something that has happened to you that has made you go, okay, this is different. What's something that you've been through in your career?
The farmer ranch.
Big hurdle, yeah.
I'd be honest with you, locating individuals sometimes. Sometimes I
What do
get
you mean?
hired. Well, I mean, like I'll be hired to represent a buyer that wants me to go find a ranch. And trying to find them sometimes. They may have multiple owners and they may not, sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't. I mean,
Yeah.
it gets difficult sometimes.
Yeah,
Or
right.
I experienced that. Trying all these websites, because you go to the internet, you can't find them that way. Yeah, well, some you can, but it's not easy.
What do you do?
Well, if you had a deal recently that there was a lien on a piece of property, this is not just farm and ranch, could be on anything. The lady was 97 years old and living in Houston. Nobody could find her. We had no idea, and we had to get a release. It had been paid off, but never signed. And I hate to admit it, I actually went to the cemetery and found that her husband had passed away. She wasn't there.
She was with her boyfriend out of dedication. Dedication.
That's the side of a Remax agent.
We're gonna do Tuesday over for.
Okay, great beans.
Comment or question, I don't know if it's in regard to this or.
From what we just finished in the discussion, Joyce wanted to add in, because it was something that just recently got discussed in our sales meeting, but she just wanted to let y'all know that she's been told by the county judge and commissioner that in Palo Pinto, the amount of land to be able to get the exemption is changing to 10 to 15 acres regardless.
The state law, there's no minimum on the state law. There's really not. It's each county, each district has the right to set their own minimum standards. I mean, if you go here or in your country especially, if you go smaller, it's very productive land. You go to Alpine, maybe a different story.
So when now you've got the listing, you've got the client, it's come through word of mouth because they know your specialty. What's the difference in advertising these type of properties versus advertising a residential home?
And do you put them on MLS or a different site as well?
Mine's on MLS when I've had them. The listing I had in Carlton, it was on MLS. And then of course that goes on to all of your other ones, your realtor, that kind of stuff. Now I did advertise the farm and ranch on Texas horse properties and lands of Texas. A lot of people, if they're looking for a ranch, will search lands of Texas. And that's
You'll search outside of their agent.
I've
or
even done
the
that
MLS.
when I was looking for the particular ranch for the people that bought the large ranch. Just north of Stephenville, I would look on lands of Texas and find different places that way myself, because it was hard to put in the amount of money in MLS that they were needing to spend for their 1031 exchange and the amount of acreage they wanted. So I've looked on lands of Texas myself and have found found them several ranches that way.
You
to
guys
look at.
do? Same
I use
systems?
land of Texas a lot, and you're right, a lot of it's the timing too. Most stuff now, a lot of it is in MLS, but I mean, as little as 10 years ago, a lot of these agents, you go south of Glen Rose in Hamilton County, they don't participate in MLS. You hear it at the coffee shop, or you better know somebody, is what you better do.
Watch the cemetery, see who shows up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, fresh flowers on the mound.
Yeah, but that's why a good contact point in certain other areas that I have, and I'm sure y'all do too, that if it's like I just did a deal in Cross Plains out there, and it's helpful to know agents that are familiar. This agent that I talked to was out of Abilene, and and a lot of stuff they just flat still to this day. A lot of those ranch deals they do not put in MLS. Sometimes the owner doesn't want it in there.
Yeah,
they want it quiet. Which to me is kind of like winking in the dark. It's kind of like I've got a $3 million place here, but I don't want to sign it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have that quite frequently, run into that.
We can put it on the back of the 300
Yeah.
acres and you won't see the sign, sir.
They don't, some people are just, especially in that caliber of plant, they're very private, and I don't blame them.
I get it.
I love the old
Yeah,
school
mine is
house.
very
It's my
private.
favorite.
Yeah, for me too, on especially some of my bigger properties, most of my sellers don't want signs on their property. They don't want people doing the stop by, looky-loo, let me see it, and that has to do with, especially horse people. We don't want anybody we don't know near our animals. I get a little nervous when like a car stops in front of my fence, I'm out there like, what are you doing? I'll stick the dogs on you, like.
German Shepherds.
Yeah, I'm like, so a lot of people are private and same with you.
With that amount of money that most of them
Yeah.
spend on a ranch, they don't want it all over,
Yeah.
Facebook. Like when mine closed, I never mentioned their name, and I still don't. They just didn't want their name out there that they just bought this large property, which, it was a 1031 exchange. They sold their property, so a bunch of land out in the Permian Basin to a developer. And then they wanted to be closer to this area, but they have several ranches. I mean, and lots of cattle.
So besides advertising the property, how do you guys advertise yourselves within that community so that people know that you have this specialty?
Most of mine is just local. I mean, it's,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest with you, my fertilizer dealer, my feed, my red chain feed, I mean, I've got a network of people that I deal with. Most of mine, quite honestly, is word of mouth.
Yes.
It's back.
I mean, I think that's the most solid way of building business is by referral and word of mouth. So you guys too?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sphere of influence is the number one way anybody gets clients, whether you're residential or farm and ranch like us. So for me, a horse world contacts, 100%. I'm at a horse show, somebody's looking for a property, they're gonna come talk to me, or they're gonna have somebody call me from their family or whatever it might be. But yeah, same. Guy at my feed store, he knows that I'm an agent. My shaving supplier, they know I'm an agent. So it's just about using your contacts, of course, just like anything else, to promote yourself. And then I also think a huge part of it, because of the world that we live in, which is all immediate gratification, and everybody wants to see things right now. So I think, yeah, you have to be very visible in the social space, whether that's, you're utilizing social media in a limited way or a big way. Myself personally, I utilize it in a big way because that's viewership, and people out of state especially, they're not gonna know your feed supply guy, so you gotta get yourself out there somehow, so.
And you have a YouTube too.
I do, yeah, so I do a lot of like viral videos for my listing. And I kind of do something different. I like to create storylines for my listings, because really what we're selling when we sell farm and ranch is we're selling a dream. We're not just selling, a piece of property.
I love that.
Yeah, so and that's true. If people have cattle or horses, I mean, it's usually a life passion, a life work. And when you're selling those type of properties, you want to see that reflected. And I like creating pieces that are very viral because not just buyers are going to watch that. Not just people looking at real estate or agents will watch that. And the higher viewership you have, the better chance you have for saturation.
It's all about impressions.
Yes, actually.
So how do we find you on that if we want to follow?
Yeah, you can follow me on YouTube at the Live Your Dreams Realtor. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook under the same handle, or under Ayla Reed at Remax, and that's my stuff. So,
I like that you do social. That's fabulous.
thank you.
So, and we talked a little bit about the dark side and the hurdles. Steve gave us one. What do you guys love about farm and ranch versus residential?
Something different every day.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, just I like being outside.
Oh.
Just something different. You see different country. I really enjoy, like this place I just showed in Cross Plains, just seeing different land, exploring different places. I have to admit, different restaurants too. I like to find a little taco deal down here. I did, I found a good one. So, you can tell where my motivation is.
Yeah,
It's
you're able
really
to relay
cool.
that.
Yeah.
Been eating a lot of chicken fried steak.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
What
One
about
of
you
the,
girls?
one of the ranches that I showed these people was in Benjamin on the Davis, Lake Davis?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh, this was huge. And it's literally on the map, Lake Davis. They have their own lake. It was, but this land was beautiful all through and through, but it just wasn't the right land for him and the right ranch for him. is why he didn't purchase that one, but it
But
was.
you fell in love with it.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah, I just,
Take my money.
yeah, I mean, it was so big that they had sea-doos there.
Mhm.
Like it was a big, that was amazing. And, but there was some, there were some downfalls to it. There was a little bit of a flood zone in an area that was gonna take out most of an area that was nicely fenced. But
Flood zones, another.
That's another, yeah.
Yeah.
Huge issue.
Yeah, they're selling 100 acres and 80% in a flood zone. You wonder why it's a great deal.
Yeah.
Well, you don't get it. This is awesome.
Well, it might be a great view.
I have a clients right now that they would love a lot of acreage, but they have a certain budget that they want to spend. And a place in Erath County that they want is 18 acres. Well, I'm gonna probably bet you that 10 of that, all of the water from everyone else's property, when it rains, it's gonna come down into this beautiful large tank that's on this property. So what is that gonna do to theirs is where they wanna put their arena and where they wanna put their barn, everything's gonna be flooded.
Well,
when
then
it
you have
does
water
come in.
retention rights too, which in your area specifically, I remember calling, my sister wanted to build a venue and I was calling the city asking about their water retention, if she could add a pond or what she would have to add.
Yep.
That's a whole nother ballgame too.
Yeah, it is. Floodplain is definitely, something I deal with consistently on a lot of property where I'm at. Because we have Lake Ray Roberts and we have other things. And so we've got a lot of 100-year floodplains around. But on the flip side of that too, if you do have a large, tract and it does have improvements and the rest out of the floodplain, that it could be a huge beneficial because bottomland is extremely rich. And then if you are grazing a lot of cattle, you maybe don't have to supplement as much as you would have to otherwise. Or if you do have mares and babies during those summer months, you've got a lot of rich, grass that they are able to consume instead of having to buy every flake of hay that goes in their mouth. So I can tell hay prices. I just got my food bill. Let's not talk about it. But
There was a wreck on 820 and the guy lost a whole bunch of hay up in fire.
oh
It
no,
was all burnt up
oh no, that's a bad
on
day.
my way here.
Oh, on
I saw
20?
that.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
this morning.
This
Okay.
morning.
I saw that. I wondered.
I was just like,
what's going on?
oh, that poor man.
You just
that's not
lit it all off, lit
No.
that money on
Well, it
fire.
wasn't even the truck either. It was all of his product.
It's all his product out in the middle of the road, and just you could see some of it was burnt up and
Bad day.
It is.
bad
So,
morning.
Eva, what do you love about it? What are you passionate about the farm and ranch?
Oh, man, I mean, it's so closely marries what I love so much together. So, I mean, horses are my biggest passion in life. They always have been. And selling farm and ranch just made so much sense because I was able to take what I was so passionate about and translate that into a way to feed myself and my passion and help other people and specifically help people that love to do what I love to do. So being the outside is a huge piece of it. I am definitely a country girl. I was joking with Tracy. I was like, yeah, I wore a dress today and I don't have hay in my hair. It's a win. So, for me, it's just being able to create, a career out of a existing passion and kind of blend the two together. And I love being able to do that. And there's not a better day in the world than when you get to literally go see a new listing on horseback. There's nothing
Oh,
compares to that.
that's gotta be amazing.
I think that's a really good place to leave it, but if there's anything that the three of you want to contribute that we haven't covered, please feel free to chime in, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to chime in.
You said you do have a question?
I do. Zoom World has a question. They've just asked for everyone that's on Zoom, they've asked if y'all could, one of you give again the site that you go to not only advertise, but to also look for ranch and land listings. And is it a website or is it a Facebook page?
Lands of Texas is just a website.
Yeah.
Texas Horse Properties is on Facebook. And you can find nice horse properties on there, and it's everywhere. It's not just around here. You can find beautiful property on Texas Horse Properties all over the state of Texas
Awesome. Thank
on
you.
there.
I found my fun fact question. I was talking to Melanie when we were going through those questions. I wish I had a fun fact. And I asked this question because in my world of trying to be country and learning how city I actually am, my sister was looking at large plots of lands and we bought a four-wheeler and we wrote that off because it was needed to venture out. So I would love to know what is one of your favorite or most expensive or funnest things that you bought as an expense for those 300-acre properties? Because you mentioned Polaris.
I
Yeah.
just ordered a new one, just got it February, I guess. Yeah, they're not cheap.
Yeah.
They go up. I had another one I bought
Did you put Remax and balloon on it?
No, I did not. No, I did not.
Oh, we need to, that would be so.
You gotta know the guys I deal with. Oh, yeah. I'm in a little different world.
You disappear out there, we never find you again.
We'll get him a
Somewhere.
blinky.
I-
Yeah, driver's
I-
license.
Yeah.
The plate cover.
Put your face on the back,
Oh, yeah.
just
I
for
deal
good
with
measure.
a little different crowd.
Yours may
They
be
are
the
colorful.
actual horses.
Yeah, man, my accountant does not like that. Yeah, riding off a horse, I mean, I don't know, that might be a little tricky, like you, equipment for sure, but, yeah, I wish I could ride off my horses. I'd be in the market for a real nice show pony this year if I could.
Same thing. I mean, we have a ranger that will load up and take with us if we're gonna look at horse. You know, if it's something like at the Carlton one, I've taken my own, but you know, I've been really blessed with, and some of this has to do with being, and y'all may have experienced this too, is another agent, like the listing agent is usually required at some of these larger ranches to go out with you. And so both of the, you know, I looked at one over here in Parker County that was large, and that listing agent was there with his big, nice, you know, Polaris, and the same thing in Benjamin. So the ones that I knew personally that were friends of mine for years, I didn't, you know, I was obviously the listing agent, and I took my own Polaris out there when I showed the property, but
Well, I agree. It's just not a requirement, but like I said, most of the larger tracks, I attend all the showings. And
well, if you're not familiar with the area, you know, I will go there and say, like in Benjamin, you know, I wasn't 100% familiar with that area. And so that was good though, but that large of a ranch, I wanted somebody else to be there than just me. And, you know, my husband would go on something like that as well. But that large of a ranch, I didn't want to get off back in there and not know exactly the trail to get back besides.
Like Steve saying, where am I?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, because you'll get back there and if you don't have good cell service, which I have both AT&T and Verizon, so I can pick up something on both phones. But if you get back there and don't have good cell service and you can't pick up your land glide or your map right, you're just kind of out there thinking, all right.
You start looking at the sun.
Where's the sign?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me,
Bring
I'm
out the
like,
compass.
Oh, definitely.
Yep, I love that. Okay, so if there's no more questions, we have another question.
As someone who's brand new to the industry and maybe interested in farm and ranch, what is the best piece of advice you'd be willing to give?
Good question.
Great question.
Exactly what she said. Learn
Just
the content.
Learn
Yeah.
your,
Learn what.
And figure out what you want to specialize in within farm and ranch, because it's very broad.
It's a variety.
It's a huge
Sure,
variety.
sure.
If you want to be super focused on, you know, equine properties, whether that's a small ranchette or whether that's a larger commercial facility, that is a whole nother animal than if you're going to be selling, you know, large tracts of farmland, or if you're going to be dealing a lot with cattle. So you have to figure out where you're passionate about and then really hone those skills to figure out what you need to know. And ask for help, of course, from anybody that does it.
learn the back roads.
Yes.
Yeah. Seriously, if you have time, just pull up MLS and find some of these farms. You're not gonna be able to see the places necessarily, but drive those roads and figure out where these places are. Because you can't, I've had so many agents try to describe something they've never seen or been there, and you just can't do it. I mean, you need to go out and, like I said, again, you may not have boots on the ground necessarily, but at least drive by and know where it's located. Be a great tool if you do get a call and say, hey, I've been by that 30 acres. Or
And
300
little stuff,
acres.
you know, it's little to us, but big for someone that doesn't know. If someone goes in and says, okay, when you go in, you know, down the Cleachy Road, once you pass the silos, turn west. If you don't know what a silo is, you're out there thinking, okay, I'm not gonna ask.
Yep.
And I think that's another thing.
But what
They
is a
use east,
silo?
west, north, and south, where we do right and left.
Right.
That is an that's absolute, and so know that.
In case you don't have cell service, take your compass until you're familiar with north, south, east, west.
But, you know, in Tennessee, if you have somebody moving from Tennessee and they want to move to Texas, Tennessee, they call everything a farm.
Yeah.
Everything's a farm. So if someone called me and said, I want to buy, 500-acre farm, I'm thinking, okay, we're fixing to plant peanuts, cotton, wheat, coastal, and really they're bringing they're cutting horses or they're bringing some. So each state, if you're bringing someone in, may call something completely different. I mean, Tennessee calls a water hose a hose pipe.
Fact.
Tennessee people call a water hose a hose pipe. So if you're, you
Hose pipe, not
Yes.
pipe.
It's a different language
Yeah.
back there, you know, Kentucky, Tennessee, and parts of Arkansas. I mean, I can remember when I moved from Washington State to Kentucky, and the first time I looked at my husband, I said, did you understand what they said? Because I think I'm in a new world. He's like, can you repeat that?
Yeah, a little bit.
So you have to learn lingo from a state coming in, a different state coming in here as well. And I mean, as silly, like I said, it is a silo, you know, or whatever they may tell you to pass by.
Grain
tank.
bin.
A tank, or,
Right.
because
So
a
many
lot of people
think
call them
that's a metal
ponds.
structure.
Well, they call them,
Right.
they, a lot of people call them ponds. Well, really, it's a tank. And it's not, it's just, it's still a hole in the ground that does look like a little tiny fishing pond, or it could be great big, but like you said, some may say a tank and you're looking for a tank.
Yes.
And then to them, it's just water in the ground.
I've heard of lots of fun closing gifts for farm and ranch people. I had a friend that used to stock the pond. That was her closing gift. She would stock the pond as a
That's
closing,
good.
yeah, and send out the fish.
Yeah,
Okay.
the favorite one I did is one of my client moved from California here, and he always wanted a Texas Longhorn, so got him a Longhorn as a
There you
closing
go.
gift. But let me tell you, getting him in the trailer was the whole thing. He was
Did
almost
that
the
go
same-
on YouTube? Let's do something.
It should have gone on YouTube because it
Almost
was
the
6
same.
hours. It took 3 cattle dogs and 4 people and a lot of cursing.
My husband bought me, I always wanted Longhorns, and he bought me 2 Longhorns about 5 years ago. And there was a guy that stopped by one day that was visiting from Ohio, and he wanted to know if he could buy my Longhorns. And I said, what are you gonna do with my Longhorns? And he said, I just want them. I want to be the only one in Ohio that has real Texas Longhorns. And I said, they go together. These two have been together. They were raised together. They go together. And he bought them, but my husband was out of town and rodeoing. So these people are from Ohio. So it's basically me. And one of them has an 8-foot spread. And so trying to get them in this guy's stock trailer was comical in itself. It was,
Did they make it to their destination?
They made it to their
Okay.
destination, and how we finally, loaded them is we backed the trailer up and forced them in, like you just back them up in a corner and they have no way else to go but in. But they're doing this the whole time, and Hank's horns were sticking out as they left, so.
Love this. Okay, so as we close up, no more questions in chat?
I've got a question. So, one thing that's new here, for me coming from Washington State, where you have all these, open hunting areas. And now you've got these high fences, and you've got people wanting to buy land for high fences. How does that all work?
In what format? You mean, it's how
Well,
they,
because, for me, I'm a wildlife background. So, there's different rules and regulations in different states, and people, are saying, say somebody from another state says, hey, I've always wanted to have a hunting ranch. I want to look for land that's got a high fence, because my husband asked Mechelle to look into one just recently. And so then you've got all these exotic animals and stuff like that. So if you've got somebody that approaches you, or have you ever had, and how do you go about that? Because I would think there's a lot of rules and regulations you've got.
well, there is with the
No,
deer
too.
herd, and to be honest with you, I'm not very versed in managing the deer herd. The state of Texas owns all the deer in the state of Texas. That's the way it works. And if you impound them, you have to adhere to their guidelines. Now, what they are, I don't know. I just know that they do
Well,
require
and then
that.
you have to pay, there's a fee
I
because
think there is.
you're taking all the public's
Right.
wildlife and it's often it's owned by the public.
And a lot of these
they
people will
import a lot of that.
They
They will
import.
do
Yeah,
like.
because they
elk and
have-
stuff.
Yeah, and
I've
my
seen
sister
exotics.
has a good friend
That's what she does.
people.
He actually owns Arrow Ventures, and he takes people on exotic hunts.
Yeah.
So he has a lot of people in that area, and it's a lot to it. It's way more than anything because of the different breeds that they have and the exotic animals and everything.
Well,
And
because you have a
then-
lot of, African species here, you
Yeah.
have.
And they
there's so
breed,
many-
and they
yes.
breed on their land, and so, yeah, that's
So
why
I
they
wondered
charge
how
good.
that, how you
It's a
would,
real good
I guess, do
business.
it. Yeah.
There's places in southern Hood County, over in the Biloxi area that are, I mean, it's not uncommon for this particular ranch, I won't say the name of it, to have a $500,000 breeding buck.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a football player that has it out in, where do I always say I like, out towards,
Waxahachie.
no.
Jacksboro,
Jacksboro,
my
Oh,
brother-in-law
oh, okay.
managed that ranch before he left.
Fletcher Cox,
Mm.
yeah, and
Yeah.
he loves it. And it's amazing, you would never believe, you'd see this guy on the field and you would never believe it, and
So
he's,
before he
Yeah.
had it, that particular one to come and hunt was $100,000.
oh, yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah,
There,
it's-
we
it's
used to
expensive.
have, we used to have hunting land not too far from there, like we leased it, a piece of it, little piece of it.
Yeah.
And there was a ranch that was by it, that's a drop in the hat to go
The
hunt their land.
facility there is
Amazing.
ridiculous, eat right down to the body
Amazing.
wash. They had a chef that came in.
Yep.
I mean, it
Oh, wow.
was,
Most of them
it
do.
was an experience.
Yeah.
DR Horton has a really nice
do you
ranch in
know John Gospel?
Bakersfield. And it's expensive to go there. There's a huge lodge. My cousin used to run that ranch and it's lovely. And he only allows like employees to go out and bring maybe one different family member, but DR Horton has a beautiful ranch in Bakersfield, Texas.
So does everybody else agree that this is a completely different world? It
Yes.
really is, and within it, there's extra little pockets of worlds. I want to thank you guys all so much for sitting here and
Thank
answering
you.
these
Thank
questions.
you for asking.
Can we go this way backwards and just one more time say your name and the best way to contact you in case anybody watching the recording wants to reach out? Steve.
Steve Cook, now with Remix Trendy recently, my information's on our website there, my email, my phone.
Ayla Reed, I'm with the Remax in Highland Village, and my contact information you can find within our Remax family, or you can find me on all social platforms at the Live Your Dreams Realtor.
Mechelle Tyler, and my phone number and stuff is also on any of our Remax website.
Michelle likes to text, I know that, so.
I do.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
guys are amazing. Yes.
That was amazing.